Husband juggled kids and chores while I ignored our family life. Now I'm desperate to reconnect and be present. Before COVID, I thought I was the embodiment of the supermom, juggling my career in corporate law, raising 2 kids, and keeping everything at home under control. I would look at my husband, Kay, who is 2 years younger than me and works in the pharmaceutical industry, and think of him as just a slight upgrade over the typical man-child husband. He spent so much time on video games, barely engaged with me or our kids, an 11-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son. Or so I believed. When the pandemic hit, my world changed while his routine barely shifted. I was suddenly stuck at home, but Kay kept working because his field was essential. I kept my regular work schedule, filling my former commute time checking on the kids to make sure they ate lunch and attended their online classes. During those first weeks, I noticed Kay still made efforts with the kids, helping them with their homework, somehow playing video games at the same time, and, as always, cooking. He only had 2 main chores, cooking and, well, cooking. I never understood how exhausting prepping 3 meals a day for a household of 4 truly was until the whole dynamic shifted. Intimacy between us had faded into a rare occurrence, only happening when I initiated, and more often than not, met with his exhaustion, or indifference. When it happened, the lack of enthusiasm and effort on his part would leave me cold. I found myself daydreaming about leaving him, seeking an affair, something, anything to lessen the overwhelming burden I carried as the only person, I thought, making any real effort for our family. Then last month, Kay tested positive for COVID and had to isolate in the basement for 2 weeks. I took time off work, knowing my responsibilities were about to double, and truthfully, wanting a break for myself. That's when my view of everything changed beyond recognition. I quickly realized just how much Kay actually does and how little I'd noticed or appreciated it. He is so much more involved with our children than I am, and not just logistically, but emotionally, creatively, in every sense that matters. Keeping 2 kids happy and entertained all day, every day, was an Olympic-level task, and I was running out of steam after barely the first lap. On top of that, cooking wasn't just cooking. The effort to figure out what to make for 3 meals, ensuring everything was ready on time, was relentless. The kids' homework was a mystery to me, the content was so foreign, so irrelevant to my day-to-day work, I ended up calling on Kay for backup. Despite being sick, he played with the kids via video calls, inventing games and scavenger hunts, channeling Disney characters. Seriously, he had them role-playing a platypus and a mad scientist. If you know, you know. He kept the children's world lit up and full of creativity even from the quarantine zone. If he hadn't been so present, so resourceful, I know I would have broken down with 2 bored kids and the mountain of daily routines. This forced me into some painful self-analysis. Sure, I knew all their teachers' names, doctor appointments, and allergies, but that was just the bare minimum. Our schedules were a study in contrast. Both of us worked full-time, but I didn't return home until 7 p.m., while he was back by 5. The only time I would really see the kids on weekdays was at dinner, after which Kay had already handled dinner prep and packed our lunches for the next day. While I was out running or binging TV in the evening, he was still there with the kids, or prepping things for the next day. I realized with a jolt that I interact with my children only at dinner. He was the one who woke them up, got them ready, dropped them off at school, and picked them up. I, meanwhile, woke up at my leisure to find breakfast already on the table. Weekends? Saturday was my girls' night. Sunday, brunch with the girls was sacred. Kay sometimes went out with his friends on Fridays, but more often stayed home, because I would make a fuss if I felt neglected. The more I watched him, not out of admiration at first, but hoping he'd prove just as checked out as I was, the clearer it became that his selfish 1 hour on video games was the only slice of the day truly for himself. Otherwise, he was constantly engaged with our kids, enthralled in their Minecraft worlds or sprawled on the ground, a crucial part of their action figure universe, right beside me, while I sat glued to another dumb reality show. I had completely missed how he would subconsciously reach for me, rubbing my calf, laying his head against my knees, while I paid him no mind, lost in television. No wonder he was so exhausted every night. Last weekend, rather than heading out, I stayed in. I finally witnessed their Saturday night Snakes and Ladders game, homemade and full of laughter. Sunday, they built a command center for their imaginary spaceship, using nothing but junk from a big old box, and roleplayed for hours. I had never realized any of this was happening. I felt so out of place, like an intruder in their joyful little world. I wanted desperately to join in but couldn't see anywhere to fit myself in. Watching them, a wave of jealousy, regret, and anger, mostly at myself, hit me. I've spent this whole time blaming Kay, only to realize I've been living a nearly child-free existence while he's quietly carried all of us. Sometimes I even wonder, do they even need me? How do I become a bigger part of this, a better mother, when they all seem perfectly content as they are? Update 1. The day after all my worries and fears came crashing down on me, I found an unexpected opportunity with my kids and just took the leap. It was during my lunch break, usually my routine little escape, when I wandered into the living room to find both of them making paper airplanes, their eyes glued to a YouTube tutorial. I jumped in, saying I wanted to help, and immediately felt this weird, heavy sense of confusion radiating from them. I don't even know how to describe it, but it was almost as if I'd walked in as some kind of authority figure, not their mom. Their faces, even before I spoke, looked guilty, like I was about to scold them for making a mess or wasting time. That realization absolutely broke my heart. How did I become the parent my kids tiptoe around? I'd always pictured myself as the fun parent, the one who sits on the rug and builds Lego castles or makes indoor forts. But that image seemed laughably far away. The way my son and daughter looked at me then, I couldn't even call myself a real mom, not yet. Still, I sat down, and we made paper planes and raced them across the house, laughing louder than the TV in the background. That sparked a memory, me in college, disappearing for hours into the world of origami, and I ordered some origami paper the minute I got back to my desk. The rest of the afternoon slid back into its worn groove. I worked, my husband came home, played with the kids, got dinner ready. I laced up my shoes and went for my run. We followed our predictable script. After dinner, I could barely look my husband in the eye. I'd been running over every possible thing to say in my head, how to explain what's been festering inside me, but the words always dissolved into silence. Instead, I just suggested a soft change in our bedtime routine. I told him he could take it easy. I'd do the bedtime ritual with the kids and tuck them in. My daughter's face burst into a smile so wide it almost made me cry, but my son said only his dad could tuck him in. So, we split the duty. That stung, but after all the time I've spent walls up, I can't expect them to let me in overnight. Tucking my daughter in, she whispered that making paper airplanes was the most fun she'd had in a while, and asked quietly if we could do it again tomorrow. I said yes, maybe a little too enthusiastically, and stayed beside her until she fell asleep, breathing slow and even. When I finally crawled into bed, my husband was already scrolling on his phone, half buried in the covers. He looked so drained, so tired, and I couldn't summon the courage to break our silence, to just let the truth pour out of me. I almost cracked. I wanted to confess everything I'd been holding back, but I just chickened out and turned off my lamp. I don't know how to start this conversation. It terrifies me. There are confessions I can't bring myself to share with him, like how, in my lowest moments, I wondered what it might be like to step outside our marriage. I never did, but just thinking about it sent a fresh wave of guilt rolling over me. He was cheated on before by an ex, and it shattered him for over a year. I couldn't bring myself to ever hurt him like that. Every day since, I've been doing origami with the kids during lunch, tucking my daughter in at bedtime, begging silently for my son to let me in, even a little. I've been waking up earlier so I can eat breakfast with them before work, trimming down my runs just to linger at the kitchen table while they grind through their homework. I've tried to help my husband with dinner, but he's got his own rhythm in the kitchen and always nudges me out. In the evenings, while the three of them play Minecraft and I zone out to TV, I've started showing him small gestures, returning his little touches, playing absent-mindedly with his hair, the way I used to back when we were dating. It startled him at first, but now he just beams at me, and for a heartbeat, I can pretend like we're all right. But our nights, after the kids are asleep, haven't changed. We both sit on opposite edges of the bed, retreating behind our screens, too scared or tired to talk. I know that nothing truly meaningful is going to happen unless I find the courage to say everything out loud. But every time I try, fear pins me to the mattress. I plan to talk to my in-laws, who have been like second parents to me for years, to ask them how to start rebuilding with the man I married. Once, it was so easy to talk to him about anything: the weather, the worst day at work, silly dreams that barely made sense in the light. Now, I can't even look him in the eye and say what's really on my heart. How did I lose that with the kindest man I've ever known? God, I wish he could just see all these unsaid things in my head, hug me until the fear goes away, and tell me, like he always used to, that everything's going to be okay. I'm still so scared, but I have to find a way through, for all of us. Update 2. Let's start at the very beginning. It recently hit me, hard, that I had become a terrible partner and wife, checked out emotionally for at least the past 4 years. That realization was a punch to the gut, and I knew I needed to change. So, I began making a conscious effort to do better, to really try. The week after I started this journey, I made extra effort to connect with our kids. My son and I were getting along better, there was a new warmth between us, something we'd been missing. My daughter, though, was still hesitant. She kept her distance, her guard up. My husband, meanwhile, was completely oblivious to the transformation brewing inside me, to the inner turmoil and the tiny steps I was taking. I kept telling myself I needed to talk to him, to lay everything out, but every time I prepared for the conversation, I chickened out. Fear had me by the throat. Then, almost like life was handing me a new test, my husband came to me late one evening. He looked so miserable. He told me work was burying him, so much so that he wouldn't be able to spend time with us for the foreseeable future. He said he needed help with the kids. But the way he asked, it was like a man begging a stranger for help, not a husband confiding in his wife. That hurt. Bad. Something in me broke a little, but to me, this was another shot at redemption, a real chance to step up as the partner and mother I should have been all along. I told him he didn't need to ask me like that. They're my kids too, he's my husband, and I'm here to help and support him. I'll never forget his face in that moment, the relief, the delight. How bad had I been, for my husband to find such profound joy in me just doing my bare minimum? Over the next few weeks, I became the primary caretaker for our kids. My husband still helped them with homework. I tried taking over, but it was a disaster. With my daughter especially, it took 3 times as long, with me frantically Googling answers, and bedtime kept slipping later and later. So, I decided to take charge of dinner instead, but my husband gently intervened and ordered takeout. It turns out, the reason he's done all the cooking in our relationship is because I'm terrible at it, and he didn't want to let me know. Why does he even put up with me? I can't cook. I can't help with homework. I hadn't been an involved mother or partner. The defeat sunk in deep, and I must have shown it, because my husband wrapped me in a back hug, smiled, and told me he loved me. But I wasn't going to stop. If I couldn't help out in these specific ways, I figured there must be other things I could do for my family. I made it my mission to really get to know my kids, to help or even just entertain them however I could. Every afternoon after work, instead of disappearing for a run, I started taking my daughter for walks while my son rode his bike around the block. The longer days made it perfect. These walks were a revelation. I learned so much about my daughter. She wants to be a scientist like her dad. Her favorite ice cream shop is this unassuming little place at the mall. She wants to learn Korean so she can speak to my parents. Apparently my husband has been teaching her for months. I never even noticed. She loves K-pop and Mamamoo is her favorite group. Guess she got her music taste from me, and she's dying to learn how to style her hair. I began chatting with her in Korean during our walks, helping her with workbooks my husband had gotten. To my surprise, she picked it up quickly, which inspired my son to want to learn too. Every night, I tucked both kids in. And when I finally got to bed, my husband would be waiting, eager to hear about my day. For the first time in forever, intimacy trickled back into our marriage, and it was wonderful. The weekend pretend games the kids used to only play with their dad continued, but now he'd sometimes ask me to sub in so he could work. I was blown away by how imaginative my kids are, their ability to improvise wild scenarios clearly inherited from my husband. He's an incredible storyteller, almost to a frightening degree. He can lie through his teeth and nobody would ever know. It used to terrify me, but in our marriage, he's always been honest, hating to bring that kind of subterfuge between us. Even when I played with them, I often felt like an outsider, the awkward adult in a sea of wild creativity. But my kids never seemed to notice. I might not be as smooth or quick-witted as their father, my improvisation often lands somewhere between cringy and bizarre. I could hear my husband stifling his laughter from the other room, but they love it, and slowly, I started to feel like I belonged. Then just yesterday, my daughter wanted to play Mario Kart with my husband, but he was busy and instead suggested she ask me. I'd never played before, but I said yes. Immediately, I saw something click in his eyes, a devious sparkle. After lunch, he came out with a cardboard box with slits in it and an empty soda can stuck to the back. He'd invented realistic Mario Kart rules. We had to use the switch steering wheel and physically press pedals for gas and brake. My son was the referee. Every time we messed up, 3-second penalty. It was honestly the most exhausting thing I've ever done. We played for hours, both my daughter and I starting to hate my husband and son for making the rules so hard. But it was completely worth it. Afterward, my daughter asked if we could play like that every weekend. Hearing her ask me, knowing she wanted to spend time with me, felt like I'd scaled an emotional mountain. Still, I could feel the wariness, the hesitation behind her request. I'd let her down for so long. I don't blame her. That night, after the kids went to bed, my husband confessed something. After I wrote my most recent reflection, I forgot to log out, and since he's a social media junkie, he found and read everything. For weeks, he'd been watching, testing me, waiting to see if I was really going to follow through on the realizations I'd had. That extra work? Fiction. He'd just been gaming on his laptop, keeping an eye on whether I would keep at it or give up like before. He admitted he's willing to keep working on things and that he loves me, but also that he doesn't trust me completely. He's been alone in this relationship for a long time, and these past weeks, finally having a real, participating partner, were more freeing than he'd expected. He made it clear, while content to let things go on the way they were, he'd been considering separation because life with me had become a burden. And so, here I am. I'm not perfect, not even close. But for the first time in years, I'm trying. And that's something. He was putting on a mask every single time he walked through the front door. Always smiling wide, laughing a little too loudly, making sure everyone else was comfortable regardless of what he needed. I started to see how much effort he put not just into caring for us, but into covering up how unhappy he really was. The moment I realized it, something inside me snapped awake. He told me he wants to get counseling, to actually fix the way things have been at home. He made it clear, painfully clear, that if things ever slip back to what they used to be, he's not going to hold on. He said after finally experiencing even a brief taste of what real happiness could feel like these past few weeks, he's never going back to the old way. And if that means walking away from this marriage, he will. That was when it truly hit me just how close I was to losing him forever. Somehow, I barely made it. This is my last opportunity to fix the relationships that matter most to me. I'm honestly grateful that I managed to pull my head out of the sand before it was truly too late. If he had asked for a divorce just a few months ago, I would have laughed in his face, made a ridiculous scene about it, and stormed out to file one myself. That's how deeply oblivious and self-involved I was. I was so far up my own ass, I would have managed to enter it twice. That is the ugly truth. I wish I could say I deserve understanding, but the truth is I probably deserve worse than any harsh words anyone could throw at me. I let things fester for far too long, and the blame falls squarely on my own shoulders. All I can do now is try with everything I have, to fix what I nearly destroyed, because if he leaves, the only person at fault will be me. Update 3. It's been 3 weeks since Kay and I started couples counseling, and I thought I was prepared for anything our therapist might throw at us. I was wrong. Dr. Martinez has this way of asking questions that feel innocent until they hit you like a freight train. Last session, she asked Kay to describe what happiness looked like to him before we had kids. He got this distant look and started talking about this girl from college, Sarah. How they used to spend entire weekends just talking, how she'd surprise him with little adventures, how she made him feel like the most interesting person in the room. I sat there listening to my husband describe a relationship that sounded nothing like ours, even in our best days. The way his face lit up talking about her made my stomach twist into knots. When Martinez asked if he'd ever compared our marriage to that relationship, the silence stretched so long I wanted to disappear into the couch cushions. Sometimes, he finally admitted, not looking at me. Especially lately. That night, I did something I'm not proud of. I went through his old college photos on his laptop while he was putting the kids to bed. And there she was, Sarah. Blonde, laughing, absolutely gorgeous, with her arms wrapped around my husband in dozens of pictures. They looked so carefree, so genuinely happy together. In one photo, she's feeding him cake, and he's looking at her like she hung the moon. I slammed the laptop shut when I heard his footsteps on the stairs, but the damage was done. All I could think about was whether he was comparing me to her every time we tried to be intimate, every time I attempted to play with the kids, every time I failed at something that probably came naturally to her. The next morning, I made a mistake. Over breakfast, I casually asked about his college girlfriend, trying to sound nonchalant. Kay's coffee mug froze halfway to his lips. Why would you ask about that? Dr. Martinez mentioned Sarah in the context of a specific question about happiness. He cut me off, his voice sharper than I'd heard in weeks. What's this really about? Our daughter looked up from her cereal, sensing the tension. I forced a smile and changed the subject, but Kay's eyes stayed on me for the rest of breakfast, wary and confused. That afternoon, my daughter came home from school unusually quiet. When I asked what was wrong, she climbed into my lap, something she rarely does anymore, and asked if Daddy was going to move away like Emma's daddy did. My heart stopped. Why would you think that, sweetheart? Emma said her parents went to a talking doctor before her daddy moved out, and now you and Daddy go to a talking doctor. I held her tighter, realizing that our efforts to rebuild our family had created a new fear I hadn't anticipated. That evening, after the kids were in bed, I brought it up with Kay. His reaction surprised me. Maybe we should tell them, he said quietly. Age appropriately, of course. But they're smart kids. They know something's changing. Tell them what, exactly? That I was a terrible wife and mother for years? He looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Tell them that Mommy and Daddy are learning how to be better partners to each other. The way he said it, so measured, so careful, made me realize he still wasn't sure we'd make it. Even after all my efforts, all the small improvements, he was still protecting himself from the possibility that I'd go back to who I was before. 2 days later, everything shifted again. Kay came home from work earlier than usual, looking pale. He sat down at the kitchen table where I was helping our son with math homework and just stared at his hands. Sarah reached out to me, he said finally. The pencil in my hand snapped. She's getting divorced. She said she's been thinking about me a lot lately. About what we had. Our son looked between us, confused by the sudden tension. I managed to tell him to go play in his room for a few minutes. What did you tell her? My voice came out steadier than I felt. Nothing yet, I haven't responded. The yet hung in the air between us like a blade. Do you want to respond? Kay was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. When he finally looked up, his eyes were tortured. I don't know, he whispered. And that terrifies me. That night, we lay in bed with an ocean of space between us. I could feel him staring at the ceiling, could practically hear the war going on in his head. Part of me wanted to demand he block her number, delete the message, pretend it never happened. But I knew I had no right to make demands. Not after everything. I need you to know, I said into the darkness, that if you need space to figure this out, I'll respect that. But I also need you to know that I'm not giving up on us. Not anymore. He turned toward me then, and in the dim light, I could see tears in his eyes. I spent so many years feeling invisible in my own home, he said, and now Sarah's telling me I was the love of her life, that letting me go was her biggest mistake. Meanwhile, you're finally trying, but part of me keeps waiting for you to stop. To go back to treating me like a convenience. I won't go back, I said, reaching for his hand. I can't. I know who I was, and I know who I want to be now. But what if it's too late? He asked. What if I've already started falling out of love with you? The question hit me like a physical blow, but I forced myself to face it. Then we'll figure it out in counseling, I said. Together. But please don't make any decisions about Sarah until we do. He squeezed my hand, and I felt a tiny flicker of hope. Okay, he said. But I need you to understand, I can't promise anything right now. I'm so confused about what I want, what I feel, what's fair to anyone involved. As I write this, Sarah's message is still sitting in his phone, unanswered. Our counseling session is tomorrow, and I have no idea what I'm going to say when Dr. Martinez asks how our week went. All I know is that for the first time since this journey started, I'm genuinely terrified that trying might not be enough. Update 4. The counseling session didn't go the way I expected. At all. Dr. Martinez started by asking how our week had been, and before I could even open my mouth, Kay said, "Sarah contacted me." Just like that. No preamble, no gentle lead-in, the words hung in the air like a confession. Dr. Martinez nodded calmly, as if exes reaching out to married clients was just another Tuesday for her. "How did that make you feel, Kay?" "Confused," he said immediately. "And guilty. And, I don't know, validated? Like maybe I wasn't crazy for thinking we had something special once." I felt my chest tighten, but Dr. Martinez's eyes were on me now. "And how are you processing this information?" The honest answer was that I'd barely slept in 3 days, that I'd been checking his phone obsessively when he showered, that I'd driven past Sarah's old apartment complex twice just to torture myself. Instead, I said, "It's hard. But I understand why she'd reach out. Kay is. He's an incredible person." Kay looked at me with surprise, and something else I couldn't quite read. "Have you responded to Sarah?" Dr. Martinez asked. "No," Kay said quickly. "But I've written about 20 different drafts." My stomach dropped. "You have?" "I never sent any of them," he said, turning to me. "But I can't stop thinking about what to say. Whether I should say anything at all." Dr. Martinez leaned forward slightly. "Kay, what do you think you're really trying to decide here?" The silence stretched so long I started counting my heartbeats. Finally, Kay said, "Whether I'm staying in this marriage because I love my wife, or because I'm afraid of change." The words hit me like a slap. I must have made some sound because both of them looked at me. "I'm sorry," Kay said immediately. "That came out harsher than I meant." "No," I managed. It's fair." Dr. Martinez guided us through the rest of the session, but I barely heard half of it. All I could think about was Kay writing and rewriting messages to another woman, weighing whether our marriage was worth saving. That night, after the kids were asleep, I found Kay in our home office, staring at his laptop screen. The cursor was blinking in an empty email draft. "What would you say to her?" I asked from the doorway. He didn't seem surprised that I'd found him there. "I don't know. That's the problem." I sat down in the chair across from his desk, the same chair where I used to pay bills while he played with the kids in the next room. Back when I thought my contributions to our family were purely financial. "Can I ask you something?" I said. He nodded. "If Sarah hadn't reached out, do you think we'd still be having these problems in counseling?" Kay was quiet for a long moment. "Probably. But maybe I wouldn't have realized how deep they go." "What do you mean?" He closed the laptop and looked at me directly. When I read her message, my first feeling wasn't guilt. It was relief. Like maybe there was still someone out there who saw me the way I used to see myself. "And how is that?" "Interesting. Funny. Worth listening to." He paused. "Worth loving without having to earn it." The words stung because they were true. For years, Kay had been performing for scraps of my attention, and I'd been too selfish to notice. "I do love you," I said quietly. "I know I didn't show it, but that's just it," he interrupted. "Love shouldn't be something you have to excavate from someone. It should be present. Obvious. Like breathing." We sat in silence for a while. Finally, I asked, "Are you going to meet her?" She didn't ask to meet. She just shared what was going on in her life. Said she'd been thinking about me. But if she did ask? Kay ran his hands through his hair. "I honestly don't know. And that scares me more than anything." The next morning, everything changed again. I was making breakfast when my phone rang. Kay's mom, crying so hard I could barely understand her. Kay's dad had had a heart attack. They were at the hospital. Within an hour, we were in the car with the kids, driving 3 hours to Kay's hometown. My mother-in-law met us in the hospital waiting room, and the moment she saw Kay, she collapsed into his arms. "He kept asking for you," she sobbed. "Even when they were putting him in the ambulance." Kay's dad pulled through the surgery, but the doctors said it had been close. Very close. As we sat in the ICU waiting room, our kids curled up asleep across 2 chairs, Kay stared at his phone. "Sarah texted again," he said quietly. "She saw on social media that I was at the hospital. She's asking if everything's okay." Something about the timing, about seeing Kay's dad so fragile and gray in that hospital bed, made everything feel different. More urgent. "Answer her," I said. Kay looked at me in shock. "What?" "Answer her. Tell her what's happening. She cares about you, and right now, you need all the support you can get." "Are you sure?" I wasn't sure about anything anymore, but I was sure that watching Kay's dad fight for his life had reminded me what actually mattered. "I'm sure." Kay typed a short response and put his phone away. For the next 2 days, we barely left the hospital. We took turns sleeping in the uncomfortable chairs, bringing each other coffee, tag-teaming with the kids. And slowly, I started to see glimpses of who we used to be together. Who we could be again. On the third day, as Kay's dad was finally stable enough to joke about the hospital food, Kay pulled me aside. I responded to Sarah, he said. But I also told her that I'm working on my marriage. That I need to focus on my family right now. I felt a wave of relief so strong it made me dizzy. What did she say? She understood. She said she hopes everything works out for us. He paused. And she apologized for the timing of her message, said she didn't realize I was going through something difficult at home. She sounds like a good person, I said, and meant it. She is. Which is why I needed to be honest with her. And with myself. That night, in the hotel room we'd gotten so the kids could have proper beds, Kay and I lay in the dark talking for hours. About his dad, about our marriage, about the future we wanted to build. I'm not saying everything is fixed, he said as we finally started to fall asleep. But I think I want to keep trying. Even though it's hard? Especially because it's hard. I reached for his hand under the covers, and for the first time in weeks, he didn't hesitate to take it. But as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah's message, and Kay's response to it, had changed something fundamental between us. Whether for better or worse, I wasn't sure yet. The real test would be going home and seeing if we could hold on to this fragile new understanding when we were back in the house where everything had fallen apart.